Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Excited to chat. We tend to keep these 15, 20 minutes, so we'll kick things off. First off, for those that have not met you before, tell them a little bit about yourself and then give us an overview of TF Cornerstone.
Perfect. So myself, the short version of, not too long, I suppose, story, but grew up in Ireland, went to university there, moved to France, worked in sales and real estate for 6 years, did a master's of finance, moved to New York 14 years ago. I moved for an unpaid internship 14 years ago, and I'm still here, believe it or not. So I spent 9 years at a private equity real estate company. So I was on the investment side for quite a while. That went well. I liked that, but I wanted to mix it up. So I did after my MBA, moved to tech. So I've been in prop tech for the last 5 or so years. So like the three kind of phases of my career, kind of sales, finance, investment, and then more recently on the prop tech side. And TF Cornerstone, I joined last year. So TFC is the third largest apartment owner in New York City, 11,500 units. Also has 2.5 million square feet of office space, mostly in New York City, but also in DC and Philadelphia. That's the current kind of portfolio makeup. And then TFC just announced over the last month or two a joint venture with Dune Real Estate Partners for, I think it's approximately 1 billion capitalization and office residential conversion strategy nationwide. So there's quite a lot going on here. There's about 150 people or so here in the corporate office in Manhattan. And the company's been around 40 or 50 years.
Jeez. Well, who says that unpaid internships don't lead to anything? Because clearly they do, right? Look at what it did for you. I always I've heard the horror stories on that front, right? Of like people with unpaid internships, but every unpaid internship I ever had led to something even better in the future. So at the time I hated it. Right now I'm not as salty on them.
It's funny how it works. I think one of the big benefits is like the general advice is do the job you want before you get it. And this is like a perfect example because you're literally there doing the job. It's more difficult for them to remove you than to keep you if you're doing if you're doing the job well. So they just wanted to keep me on.
Yeah, when I give advice to like kids that are still in school and they ask me about unpaid internships, they always seem like it's a total negative. And I'm like, if it's unpaid, the amount of work, like the amount of hours you have to give them, the expectations drastically go down too because they're not paying you. So like if you're willing to give them 5, 10 hours a week and you're gonna do a good job, they'll they'll rave about you. They'll write a great review. Like, so is that so bad if they're going to teach you something? Now, if they want you to do 40, 50, 60 hours a week, no, no. But yeah, I think just going with an open mind because there's some really good opportunities that you can get as a result.
But especially in my case, because I had zero finance experience. They had no clue if I could do anything when I show up on day one. So I had to prove it out. So in the end, it worked out.
Yeah. Well, now you ask for give me your thoughts on this company in a job application and people pass on wanting to fill it out because they say I'm not working until I get the job. It's like sometimes you have to showcase your stuff, right? It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, prove it
Um,
out.
I would love to, as we kind of kick off this conversation, thank you for the overview of your background in the company. I would love to talk a little bit about build versus buy for real estate owners and really how should they be thinking about their tech. Let's start there.
Yeah, sure. So I think just more context and kind of what I do, kind of day to day, to help conversation. So my day to day now is TFC has two in-house proprietary tech platforms. We have a system of record, which is the accounting platform. Most real estate folks have that, and then we have proprietary apartment leasing platform, which is a lead to lease, and that has high volume because we've got quite a few units. And then there's a resident services platform. So I run the resident services platform. This was built in-house 3, 4 years ago because they just weren't happy with the current vendor. You're a customer of the vendor for like 17 or so years. This is kind of a legacy tool. And they said, okay, could we do something better? And they already had a team of engineers in-house, which is not typical, I think, for real estate investment companies most of the time. So they said, okay, we can do this. So they made the decision to build something, better for their purposes and their system 3, 4 years ago. So that's kind of the genesis of kind of what I'm doing. And they brought me on to commercialize it, to take it out to kind of third parties and see if we can bring in other partners or broader kind of partnerships going on there. So that's kind of the context. So I think in build versus buy, for most people, most of the time, buying off the shelf just makes a lot more sense. It costs a lot to develop software. I think those costs are actually going down, which you've probably seen a lot of the the news, all the a lot of the AI kind of coding platforms that are sprung up. So I think the productivity for engineers and software engineers is improving dramatically over the last year or two, and I think that hasn't filtered into the market yet fully. So that could be interesting to see how that changes the dynamics. But even then, even once you build it, there's a whole bunch of questions about maintenance as well. But like, who's going to maintain the code? Is it going to be good for, for us a year or two or three from now? This is a sizable investment. And then kind of the broader question is, what are you good at and what do you want to be good at? You can't be good at everything. You got to pick one or two things. If you try for everything, it's just not going to work from an execution standpoint. So I think thinking about technology from a competitive advantage standpoint, where do you want to be? TFC is relatively unique in the sense that they are long-term owners of real estate. So they're not necessarily looking to flip or sell in the short term. There's very little sales. So these are long-term investments. So there's greater scope to invest in operational improvements, including tech-focused improvements. But in general, most of the time, it's better to buy off the shelf. And there's a whole bunch of vendors in the space, as anybody knows, who's gone to any conference of any type in the last 5 years. There's a ton of options out there, but it probably doesn't make sense to build unless you have some level of scale and you have this is part of your competitive advantage strategy over the long term, and you're willing to commit to it over the long term.
Now, is like tech a true competitive advantage for some of these owners and property managers, or is it basically just table stakes? Now, in other industries, right, you don't even really ask, like, tech just becomes there. Let me rephrase that. For the longest time, tech was a competitive advantage for many companies, and it still is in many spaces. But the reason I say is at table stakes is it becoming something like when people say AI, for instance, oh, this is an AI company. In the future, we're not going to think of companies as AI companies, or like every company is probably going to have AI components into their platform, right? So I guess with that additional context, is it still a true competitive advantage today, or is it a necessity that everyone is going to need to have? I guess it could be, the answer could be both, right? Not to put words in your mouth, but you go from there.
No, but I think you're right in a sense that they're up to a certain level. It is table stakes. That's just how it works. And then if you want to make it a competitive advantage, you can, but that's like a very deliberate decision. I think it's interesting because in the real estate space, most folks don't have chief investment officer or chief innovation officers, excuse me. They don't have like dedicated folks attached to tech. Sometimes they don't even have like a CTO equivalent. A lot of these are like small, mid-sized firms. Even the larger firms don't have like huge tech teams either. So I don't have that much internal capacity as kind of a starting point. I think in terms of table stakes, yeah, for the investment side, you have a lot of market research tools that pretty much everybody uses, which are great, which are available. The challenge is if everybody uses it, there's no advantage. It's kind of it's the new kind of base for everything. And it's like one of my mentors a few years ago, he told me about investment management, and it applies absolutely to real estate. The most important units for investment management companies are deal sourcing and capital sourcing. To the extent that you can improve those from a tech standpoint, those were very good investments. We're kind of at the operations, which is in the middle. So that means the deal sourcing already works and is relatively optimized. The capital sourcing, as applicable, works well. And now we're trying to manage the asset as kind of efficiently as possible from two perspectives there. One is increasing kind of the NOI, the core asset value. And then second is like, how many people do you need to manage from a corporate standpoint? So there's a bunch of different levers you can pull, and there's like 1,000 ways of doing this. And there's no like right or wrong answer. It really depends on the specific company and where you view your advantage, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. It's when I was asking that question, there was just a lot going through my head because it so many questions. There's not one set answer for it. So I'm glad that you kind of gave us that take. But yeah, and part of me also, like, I love talking about AI, but I also we talk about it so much on the podcast, but I feel like you still need to bring it up, right? Given its impact. So I would like to hear more still on that front in terms of, what do you see as the impact of AI on the prop tech space? We're obviously seeing pretty big impact across the whole space right now with it, but would love your take.
Yeah, sure. So we're still, I think, pretty early in the AI kind of rollout through real estate and in general across the economy, I think. Like the use cases for AI so far have been they're mostly, chatbots, a lot of customer service, sales kind of follow up. That's like the number one use case across the economy, I think, including in real estate, including in leasing, which is a sales time division equivalent. I think there's some interesting use cases, including with what we're doing. A lot of what we're doing involves like writing, sending memos as well to residents, sense that, hey, there's renovation on your floor, or there's a storm coming, for balconies or wherever the case may be. There's a lot of memos. We measured recently across just the TFC portfolio, we had like 1.1 million emails. These are custom messages going out over the last year and a half. So like very high volume of this stuff. So using AI to help generate those messages a bit faster, and kind of use of like templates and pre-filled kind of materials to save time. So that's kind of one use case. The other obvious one today is computer vision. That's not necessarily, when people talk about AI, they talk about large language models. Computer vision doesn't require an LLM for the most part, but we use that for package scanning and labeling. So for example, but that's been in operation for 3 or 4 years. This is when the front desk attendant or the package room attendant sees an Amazon package or whatnot, takes out the app that we have, scans the package, everything is pre-populated, reads everything using OCR, and you click submit, and then the resident gets the notification and is all logged in the system. So those are like the current kind of use cases. I think going forward, it could change dramatically over the next year or two. Yeah, I see some pretty significant changes. I think with AI agents, that has a lot of potential in the property management space. Because if you think about the way we think about the property management users, so we have 3 users of our platform. So our platform is resident services. That means maintenance requests, amenity reservations, communications to residents, package scanning, and a bunch of others. But those are the main categories, just people with context. So with this, we have 3 users. There's the resident in the property who's using the app. There's the on-site staff and the corporate staff. So I think there's a lot of interesting use cases for AI agents with the corporate property manager level. Because if you think about what their job is, they're managing the people on the ground in the property's staff, they're managing some leasing to some extent as well, but they're also managing kind of the resident issues that have escalated such that they need to intervene. So all the easy things are done. If they were not done, they would have, it wouldn't have rose to this level. So I think having AI agents help out with like on-site property management, like benchmarking of folks, and maybe auto kind of messages. Somebody pitched me a few days ago an AI agent kind of chief of staff to help with a startup, for example, and that would ping each individual engineer as an example, say, hey, what are you working on today? And then they would aggregate all of that and then give me, as a non-engineer, a summary of kind of what's happening. That's a really interesting use case, and you can apply that, I think, use case to a whole bunch of other, specific examples across the property level. So I think we're in the very early stage. We're at like the 1% stage of market penetration for these.
Yeah, I agree. I think in certain areas too, with where AI is being implemented, we are very far along with what it's able to do. And I think in certain areas, we are overstating where the technology is at today. There's a joke, right? Go on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. So many people in their videos are like, we're 6 months away from da 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 da. Like, I've been hearing that for the last year and a half, 2 years. We're 6 months away,
Mhm.
right? We're 6 months away from this doing everything that a human can do. Now we are progressing at record paces across the board. But I agree with you in that we're still at the early discovery. We're not yet at the ROI, like full ROI, being able to realize what that looks like. But man, unlike any other technology, we will get there way faster than we did in the past.
Oh yeah.
One of the, I mean, I was excited to chat with you for a few reasons, but one of the reasons I was really excited to chat with you is um, you've been on both sides of the space, right? You've been an owner and investor, but you've also been on the tech side. So would love to kind of hear the biggest differences that you've seen kind of being on both sides of the fence, and really, like, I guess, takeaways throughout your career that you've been able to pull from each side.
Yeah, sure. They are completely different. So, completely different. So I worked for a mid-size or so, like 60, 70, 80 people, I think, investment firm. Real estate was one of the divisions. In the real estate wings, probably like 40 people or something. They had like, I think 3, 4, 5, 6 billion or so AUM at the time of the real estate space. So I was speaking to students recently and they're asking about this in terms of risk profile. I would consider that to be like a 5 or 6 out of 10 on the risk spectrum. And then when you go to anything in startups, you're bumping up significantly. And then you can hit like 9 out of 10. So the risk return profile is very different. The day to day is very different. I even see that right now in my current role because we are a division, more or less a startup incubated within a larger enterprise. It's completely different day to day because in a startup, you're default offensive because if nothing changes, you don't survive. So there's a required slope of change and progress that's pretty steep. You don't have a choice. So this is one of the reasons I signed up for this. It is go by choice into the tech space. And I wanted that faster learning curve and absolutely, got that in many ways over the years. So those are two kind of biggest changes. I think the risk profile is much higher on the startup front. I think the growth trajectory you can become if you move to tech, you've probably seen this as well. You can get a more senior position faster because they're smaller companies, they're faster growing, there's more opportunities. You can move and learn much faster as well. And you're forced to learn. You just do not have a choice. You have to figure something out. You have to become expert. I talked to an entrepreneur on Friday who's owns a property management company in New York City. And he was asking me, like, did the MBA help with like frameworks for decision making? Because I feel like this person was saying, I feel like I'm kind of making it up, kind of on the fly. I have a problem. I find a solution online. I figure it out and I do it. And I said, that's exactly what you're doing. Well, exactly what you should be doing. You don't need frameworks because you have a challenge. You find out good sources, you find solution, you test it, it works, and you kind of move on. That's exactly what you should be doing. So yeah, these are very different lives. It's much easier at times to be on the buy side, versus vendor. As a vendor, you just have to get used to. I'm kind of in a quasi role as well. It's kind of a halfway kind of house where I am now, as kind of a carve out situation. But in general, yeah, you just have to get used to fast growth, a lot of rejection. Because as you're finding product market fit, by definition, you can get a lot of no's because they already have solutions if they know it's a problem, and they need to be convinced it's a problem if they don't have solution. So either way, you're coming up against some level of apathy or you have to, give folks kind of more context about how your solution can improve their lives.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I think no matter where people end up in their careers, I always recommend that at some point in their career they work at a very like early stage company based
Mhm.
on it just allows you to grow in a different way, right? And there's things that also people need to be at these large corporations to also understand too, because like the level of structure and, in some cases there's additional bureaucracy, but we're starting to see a change with, I think we'll see less and less bureaucracy at even the mega companies now because of AI and the new
Mhm.
like automation tools that we have. But yeah, interesting. Last question for you before we wrap up here. Any updates you want to share on TF Cornerstone? I know you have some tech investments, and I think you might have mentioned this to me before we did this, but the division that you run, you're spinning out one of the tech platforms. Would love to hear more about that as kind of closing thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So the TF Cornerstone updates, a lot going on at parent companies. Like I said, the office to residential strategy, that's a pretty big one. You can see news articles about that. Also developing a new site in Greenpoint, New York, on the waterfront there. There's news articles about that over the last kind of few months, I think. And TFC continues to develop, own over the long term. There's a lot going on there. And then at the parent company level, and then at my division level, so our division is called Portico, Portico. So this is the resident services platform. So we've spun it out for the most part, still more or less in the parent company office, but it's all separated legally, technically, and all that. We went live at our first third party customer who's a strategic partner, also in New York City, also a large owner operator. We went live with them in Q4, and now we're slowly taking it to market to kind of select operators and potentially third-party property management companies in New York City. And people ask me about this. That's the other big thing, just close on this, in terms of my career. Before this, I was national multifamily. This role now is almost exclusively New York City. Somebody told me a few months ago that the New York City real estate market is like the Galapagos Islands of real estate. It is off on its own evolutionary trajectory for the last few decades, and it's nothing like the mainland, so to speak. And that's absolutely the case because what we're doing resident services space nationally. There's some really good products, some excellent folks out there. And I know a lot of them, I've seen a lot of demos, they work pretty well. New York City, completely different regulatory environment, day to day, heavier doorman kind of interactions, all this kind of stuff. So it's a very different a kettle of fish, so to speak. So it was an exciting learning opportunity, and happy if anybody wants to chat more about it.
I love it. Once again, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Look forward to future conversations. And, I have to say, it's great to talk with someone that a fellow bald guy here. This was great.
We can connect at a deep level.
So great chatting with you. We'll talk again soon. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared.